to Hasan, that will be our speaker today. So before starting with the lecture, just a few words about our society. So this is the Italian chapter of the System and Cybernetics Society. As you know, you can join our society for a very few bucks, just $12 to join our society. And you will have the access to a lot of fantastic events and journals and opportunities. In particular, the biggest conference under the SMC Society is the System and Cybernetics Conference that this year will be organized in Malaysia. The submission deadline closed. No, it's still open because they extended again, so there's still time to submit your paper until May 7th. So please submit your paper. We have organized also several special sessions as the Italian chapter of System and Cybernetics. Another event will be held next week in Montreal, the Conference on Cognitive and Computational Aspects of Situation Management. This is again supported by our society. And the week after, there is also the International Conference on Human Machine Systems. So probably you can plan to have a tour in Canada between Montreal and Toronto for the next 2 weeks. Instead, in August, we will have also the IEEE CASE conference. And in particular, under this conference, we have organized a special session on safe and secure human-machine interaction. During this session, we will celebrate the Italian SMC Day. So please try to join us if you are attending this conference. It will be at the end of August in Bari, which is a location on the sea, so it will be great also for your vacation. And in the another conference that we are organizing again in Italy is the CRITIS conference, the International Conference on Critical Information Infrastructure Security. The submission deadline is still open, so you can still submit your paper until the 15th of May. And another important announcement, we are organizing an award for early career researcher. The aim of this award is to recognize outstanding contribution of an early career researcher. The awardee will receive a prize of 500 euros and also an invitation to give a speech at our IEEE SMC Day at the CASE conference. So if you are an Italian member of SMC and you got your PhD from so within 10 years, you can be nominated by a member of the SMC Italy chapter. So we are not accepting self-nomination, but you can find someone that nominate you for this award. There is still time to submit nomination until the end of the month. And so stop with the announcement. We can move to our talk. Today we have the honor of having Hasan Ayaz. So Dr. Hasan is a Provost of Solution Fellow and Associate Professor at the Drexel University in Philadelphia, in particular with the School of Biomedical Engineering, Science and Health Systems. And he is also the director of the Neuroergonomics and Neuroengineering Lab. The research of Dr. Hasan is centered around the neuroergonomics, which is the study of brain function in everyday life tasks. And he organized and chaired several conferences, including Coxima last year in Philadelphia on this topic. And he's also the chief editor of a new journal, Frontiers in Neuroergonomics. Of course, he published a lot of publication on this topic. It's a very hot topics nowadays. It's a very hot topic, it's a very new topics. And so I think that it will be very interesting for all the System and Cybernetics Society to know about neuroergonomics and optical brain imaging. So Hasan, please, the floor is yours. I will stop my screen. Okay.
Thank you very much. Thanks for this kind introduction, Giuseppe, and it's very nice to meet all of you. I see some familiar, faces and names that we have exchanged emails. Thanks for this invitation again. Let me start by sharing my screen. Okay, can you see?
Yes.
Yes.
Wonderful, wonderful. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone, and good morning if you're on this side. Let me hide this. Okay, so you can better see the entire screen. So today I will introduce optical brain imaging, and it's an emerging neuroimaging modality, and I will show examples of how we use it in neuroergonomics. Which is a multidisciplinary new area fueled by mobile neurotechnology, and it's focused on better understanding the human by monitoring the brain at work and everyday life. Okay, before we start, here are my disclosures related to the concepts that I will discuss today. I have pending and granted patents as well as equity in multiple startups related to brain research and medical devices. Okay, let's get started. So we will talk about human brain. And here you are seeing a beautiful micro-etching artwork called Self-Reflected from neuroscientist and artist Dr. Greg Dunn. Self-Reflected is on permanent display at Franklin Institute in Philadelphia, a world-class science museum. And if you visit Philadelphia, I highly recommend stopping by. And Dr. Dunn explains Self-Reflected's aim to elucidate the nature of human consciousness, bridging the connection between the brain and the microscopic behavior of neurons. And significant portion of basic research in neuroscience is focused on that, from genetics to molecular. But today, I will focus on microscopic scale, looking at the brain and even multiple brains and their interactions with each other in complex environment. And we're focused on everyday life. So the big question is, can we observe the brain activity in everyday life? And typical research is being done in limited lab settings with artificial tasks, and participants even cannot move. They are confined to specific postures, and they can only see and respond to artificial stimuli. And here I mean monitoring the brain in complex and diverse environment and tasks, reaching everyday life settings. And it can be work during specialized tasks, workers, warfighters, operators, pilots, surgeons, students, so anyone performing critical tasks, but also relaxing, collaborating, playing, and in short, any task that we do in everyday life. And this is a big change from typical brain imaging settings, but if successful, it can provide incredible information about the brain, how we improve us, or the tools that we use. And it's a huge step forward for human-machine interaction and also clinical domain. Well, where are we standing right now? With functional neuroimaging, brain structural configuration and resting state brain networks have been widely researched. And here, if this circle represents the whole set of brain states, maybe we can assume like the resting state represents this small area. And this is, again, a generous kind of representation. And task-specific studies have been accumulating immense data. These are very controlled, specific tasks looking at the responses in the brain and how we compute these perception, cognition, emotion, a lot of these different domains and tasks with discrete states. However, they are reaching, they're far from reaching everyday typical settings. And I would say, again, these can be, exploring these different kind of places, and they are discrete, they are separate. But there is this grand unknown area that I would like to call like akin to dark matter of these mental states. And in order to understand how brain facilitates this complex behavior, movement, emotion, cognition in our everyday life, we need to start understanding and exploring this set of brain states. And what are these that I'm talking about? They can be specialized operators like surgeons during an operation, or it can be a pilot during an actual flight. It can be a first responder engaging with like fire, or student in a classroom, or a lecturer or presenter making a presentation, an attendee, for example, looking at the phone, responding to a text. So, I mean, these are all typical things, and mobile neuroimaging actually opens this door to explore this unknown area. So that is basically the fundamental opportunity that we have right now with this emergence of mobile neurotech. And neuroergonomics benefits from mobile neuroimaging. So as a multidisciplinary research domain, neuroergonomics utilizes tools and techniques like mobile neurotechnology to study brain at work and during everyday life. Neuroergonomics is at the intersection of neuroscience, engineering, psychology, human factors, philosophy, and more. And it originates from the scientific thinking in the design of tools, technology, and working environment in the last century. And from there, neuroergonomics now represents the next frontier in brain-in-the-loop systems, measuring and understanding complex tasks and in natural environments. And it all actually came from initial thought leaders like a giant Raja Parasuraman, and his pioneering work actually led the emergence of neuroergonomics as a new scientific field. And he recognized the need for better understanding the brain with practical task settings like human and technology interaction, but neuroimaging technology wasn't ready at the time. So when we met, early on, it was a great opportunity to apply the current neurotechnology and push the frontiers in developing new techniques to accomplish this vision. Unfortunately, he passed away too soon before seeing the full potential of his vision. But today, neurotechnology is increasingly becoming capable to do the neuroergonomics research. And I would say continuous routine as a measurement is key. And wearable sensors are already here measuring the body for physiological signals, like for routine assessment. And some of these sensors are extremely low cost and consumer grade electronics, as you may suspect that they may not be that useful all the time. But actually, we are seeing big improvements in different aspects to make them more useful. Like just as an example, a recent study published in the Journal of Lancet Digital Health reported the real-time flu prediction may be possible using wearable heart rate and sleep tracking devices. And they used extremely, like low-cost sensors like Fitbit, and but collected data from 200,000 people. Imagine what we could learn about the brain itself from such big data of millions of brains and over days and months long. And sensor technology has been one limitation, but we are seeing big jumps in all aspects. And here is an example of disruptive new technology, mobile neurotechnology from Drexel. And this device can do a task that was only possible with room-sized brain imaging devices before. So this is the first portable battery-operated device to detect bleeding in the brain after a trauma. An infrascanner is a novel neurotechnology and that we developed, and it transitioned from a research idea into an actual medical device that is now routinely used in military and civilian hospitals in many countries. And I believe we will see many such novel brain sensors as we approach the neurotechnology singularity, that we're seeing a lot of development around the world and pushing kind of the limits and improving the technology in many aspects. And now wearable neuroimaging is a core technology for neuroergonomics that aims to study brain, not in isolation, but in realistic and real-world context. So neuroergonomics is the study of the brain, but you may think, isn't that already done in neuroimaging or neuroscience research? And how is neuroergonomics any different, right? So using conventional tools and approaches, we can investigate the inner workings of the brain in extreme detail, right? But the problem is that there is a basic assumption that the brain is in isolation, like you see on this slide, like a brain floating in like the blank emptiness. But in reality, right, the brain is highly connected to our body. And when we're running a task or, like in an MR, it's, far from what we do in real life. And the information we get is limited. And we cannot have, for example, two people communicate, like do social interaction, communication, and we, like looking at the brains in traditional methods. Observing the brain in such natural tasks require neuroergonomic tools, like looking at the brain activity of pilots up in the sky, flying an aircraft, or a surgeon in the operating room, or just the teacher and student communicating. And we have done all those studies, and I will hopefully have time to show you a couple of those. And again, in neuroergonomics, we know that our body impacts our brain, and both are needed to understand behavior. And typically, one or two have been emphasized at the expense of other in many different domains. But in neuroergonomics, what's unique about this is we take into account all the brain, body, and behavior holistically, but also include environment. These are in a continuum, tightly integrated, and how we think, make decisions, solve problems are all modulated by our environment, physiological conditions, and we need to monitor the brain in realistic and real-world complex settings to understand and do both basic and applied research. And here are the tools that we typically use. We record brain activity using EEG and FNIRS, increasingly mobile. There are many variety of those, and we can modulate the brain activity via external delivery of electrical or magnetic stimulation. And actually, we have also demonstrated new ways to simultaneously use a lot of these technologies, even neuroimaging and neurostimulation. And today we will focus on FNIRS, optical brain imaging. And we have developed methods for FNIRS and used it in many studies exploring the brain function in neuroergonomics, and also integrated it with other modalities. And what is FNIRS? FNIRS utilizes near-infrared light that is within 700 to 900 nanometer wavelength range. And these are, shine over the scalp using light sources and detectors placed over the skin, over the scalp. And we monitor the cortical oxygenation changes similar to fMRI in the area in between these light source detector pairs. It's a variable, safe, and non-invasive technique. And we can capture time series of localized activity, and then we can have multiple light source detectors configuration like a grid to get spatial information as well. And we can time synchronize this and get detailed information to compare task conditions, groups, and different contrasts. And speaking of giants, I have to mention also Professor Britton Chance. In his 8 decades of illustrious research career, he made significant contributions to optical brain imaging, among many other areas. And like Raja, he trained countless researchers. He did fundamental contributions to FNIRS that we use today, and we were able to work with him and develop various systems in collaboration with him, like the early mobile systems. around the early 2000s at Drexel, we started developing mobile battery-operated systems. And these are integrated to mobile computers at the time, like pocket PCs. And some of you may be old enough to know what I'm talking about. And we later used these systems in many studies from adults to infants. And this development was due to the vision of our founding dean, Professor Banu Onoral, and collaboration with key figures like Professor Britton Chance, Cumbers Prozai, and many others. These systems were then shared with many other labs and now distributed worldwide for a lot of research. And again, we are seeing this continuous evolution of portable neuroimaging systems. And at Drexel, we have been focused on developing mobile optical imaging systems from early on. And these are all images from our studies spanning the last decades, demonstrating the trend going from artificial, highly restricted environments 2 decades ago to to high fidelity and realistic settings, most recently. And from here, we can see that we can actually monitor the individual doing the actual task. And this can be outdoor walking, wayfinding, navigation, or flying an aircraft, not in a simulator, but actually doing it in the field. All right, and over the last 1.5 decades, together with collaborators, we have replicated many traditional brain mapping studies, and we used only wearable systems, and we were able to see if we can get the same patterns that were shown. And we demonstrated more recently capabilities of encoding and decoding classical task paradigms with discrete cognitive and motor and affective processes. And more recently, we were able to look at even newer and more ecologically valid paradigms that cannot be done in traditional settings. But again, mobile neuroimaging has key strengths. And early on, one of the aspects that we focused was working memory. It's a well-studied concept behaviorally and in room-sized neuroimaging like positron emission tomography or functional magnetic resonance imaging. And here is a classical paradigm where it's the verbal MBAC, where we can see the participant looking at the screen, presenting 1 letter at a time, very controlled, discrete, increased task load from 0 back to 3 back, as the participant looks at the stream of letters and identifies target and non-target. And with a lot of PET studies, there are specific brain areas that are highlighted, like 30 plus fMRI studies, meta-analysis, identifies key areas, including inferior frontal gyrus in the lateral prefrontal cortex. And when we just develop new miniaturized optical brain imaging sensors, like the one you see here, a sensor that covers the forehead area, and it's very simple, very miniaturized, and we were thinking what kind of task that we should look at. And this was one of the first targets that looking at the load-dependent brain activity using this sensor. And we demonstrated this, one of the first study looking at working memory with FNIRS. And inspired by the human factors concepts, we describe this, and replicated this in more realistic task settings, like in larger groups and different specialized, groups. And again, using the concepts from human factors to describe a new metric called neural efficiency, combining behavioral and brain activity. And we can see the neural efficiency of task-responsive brain area combined with task-relevant behavioral performance to indicate the efficiency, neural efficiency. And here, high quadrant represents high performance output with minimal input resources, and low efficiency is the opposite, low performance with high resource. And looking at MBAC here in one of the studies, we can see that there is an efficiency decrease with increased task difficulty. And we replicated this neural efficiency in multiple studies with working memory tasks and others looking at like such as speed of processing. It's a fundamental limit in cognitive performance that may underlie the general intelligence. Here showing symbol digit substitution task is a common symbol coding task. And here we are seeing improved efficiency of the same task with practice. And we later applied this to many concepts. And here's an example, a recent example on developmental coordination disorder. And we applied mobile neurotechnology and neural efficiency to push the frontiers on that. And just to mention, DCD is a neurodevelopmental condition characterized by deficits in acquiring and executing motor skills. And this is very difficult to diagnose. And no cure for it, but if it is diagnosed early on, it can help. There are steps that can be taken to help to reduce the emotional, physical burden and social consequences associated with this. And there is a gap in our understanding the neural dynamics, particularly because of the limitations of neuroimaging systems, which can typically look at fine motor movement, like finger tapping and similar tasks. So together with our collaborators in UK, in Oxfordshire, we were able to engage in the study that we looked at the gross motor movement, the whole body movement, and cognition together in the largest cohort that we know so far in this kind of task. And we used both cognitive and physical task. And this study, again, this is one of the demonstration that the participants are going through actual movement, and either just the cognitive task, auditory stroop, or stepping task, or dual task, doing both together. And our results we published is, as we know, the largest study so far, looking at the prefrontal and posterior frontal areas, that we can see the neural efficiency as a sum up, both from single to dual task. We see that there is a decrease in efficiency from single to dual, that as we expect, but the efficiency is greatest in the DCD group. That is significantly lower. So we can identify the specific neural mechanisms as target area, and we have follow-up studies to identify how interventions actually alleviate this. Just another more recent example that we published earlier this year is looking at virtual reality and problem solving and comparing it with computer screen and physical world presentation of the same 3D puzzle tasks. And looking at both subjective self-reports and behavioral performance and how the accuracy, the time to completion, and a lot of these details together with simultaneous brain activity. So again, important question in terms of educational settings, the utility of FNIRS or virtual reality. And we can see that just by, in a control scenario, looking at easy and difficult tasks, we can see the increased brain activity in the harder puzzles as opposed to easier. But the critical aspect was looking at the brain activity across the mediums, virtual reality, and the computer screen and real world actual physical puzzles. And when we combine all this together, the neural efficiency at the lower right-hand corner shows that actually virtual reality presented, the condition presented the highest neural efficiency that we can get by combining the behavioral and brain activity together. So it provides us this more nuanced understanding of this particular condition, visual-spatial problem solving. But this demonstrates how we can apply neuroergonomic approach to better understand the utility of different kind of tasks, settings, or systems. Another recent example is focusing on cognitive workload assessment. And in this case, we call this 6x6 because we monitored the brain, heart, and eye, each with two modalities. So we have 6 biomedical modalities, the most in multimodal that we know of. And altogether, we applied also 6 different cognitive tasks: working memory, attention, vigilance, risk assessment, shifting attention, situation awareness, and inhibitory control, and across multiple days. So, so here is the snapshot of the setup, and we published this previous month, actually, relatively recently, looking at use of FNIRS, EEG, EKG, PPG, EOG, and eye tracking all together on the same person and doing all these different tasks. So we have lots of results that we outlined in the paper, but just to briefly mention, again, a lot of these results, we were able to replicate the literature and our previous findings that these FNIRS, EEG, and other metrics that are indicative of task condition and session effects. And for example, with FNIRS, we can see the most significant area was in OPTO2, which corresponds to left inferior frontal gyrus that we have shown in previous studies. And it is responsive to both task condition, like easy and difficult conditions, and also session, practice of the same task over time. And we can see that again with EEG, this is also same. We can see the differences, session and condition, and with heart rate variability and other metrics, we can see with eye tracking like saccade duration, pupil diameter, different kind of sensitivity levels to this. And we compared actually these multimodal methods and how they actually explain the variability of the overall signal. And here you can see this reaction time performance data, and we replicated actually our previous multimodal studies, like where we had FNIRS, EEG, and physiological signals. And we know that EEG and FNIRS have differences, and they have complementary information as we have here. And we expected actually neuroimaging to be much higher information content from the past studies. And when we run here PCA again on the blocked process data of each task condition with a lot of feature selection, we are seeing at like the first component summing to even 90% of total variance, looking at FNIRS and EEG together explains the data. So we have lots of data to different conditions. We outlined different biomarkers and sensitivity of all those different metrics to different cognitive domains that vary based on the cognitive domain. But again, this is the same trend that we can see. Brain signals actually explain a lot of the information that we want to target, but physiological information can complement and enhance that. One aspect that I want to also mention is brain-to-brain synchrony, multimodal studies, but also multi-brain studies, like looking at interpersonal interaction and investigating brain-to-brain coupling, which can be defined as the intersubject correlations, is a new opportunity. And in one of our earlier study, we looked at speaker-listener coupling, defined as the intersubject correlations in the hemodynamic response during natural verbal communication. And this was earlier demonstrated with fMRI by Yuri Hasan at Princeton University by separately monitoring the individuals attending to the same stimuli. But in this case, we can apply variable neuroimaging, just portable variable that can monitor the people in everyday life during actual real communication. And in this case, we found that listeners' brain activity, when we run this study, again, in collaboration with Yuri Hasan, he was so excited about this option. And we can see that listeners' brain activity is significantly correlated with speakers, but with a delay. And this brain correlation disappears when the verbal communication failed. And these findings indicate that FNIRS can be used to investigate novel brain-to-brain coupling during verbal communication, like in natural settings. So here we had English conditions where the communication was in English so that both speaker and the listener understood. And in the control conditions, the speaker was talking in Turkish and the listener couldn't understand. So this was when the communication broke down. And we can see that when there is successful communication, there is this significant coupling between the prefrontal and parietal areas of the speaker and listener. And below you can see non-homologous regions coupled shown, and also the T-statistics map of time to time, both listener-to-listener coupling and speaker-listener coupling. We later looked at the same, like individuals attending the same auditory stimuli, but a group of participants listening to a story within fMRI and then later in FNIRS. And what we can see is that, again, when they're attending to same stimuli, that is the E2 condition, English 2 condition, even the English 1 is not the attended stimuli, that the synchrony disappears among listeners to listeners. And we can see that this relationship holds across modalities from FNIRS to fMRI, and we can see this temporal relationship between FNIRS and fMRI signals. In this case, FNIRS is the HBO and fMRI signal is the BOLT, blood oxygen level dependent. And in a follow-up study, we showed the first evidence that perceived speech can be identified from listeners' brain signals measured by FNIRS. In other words, we can understand what they are listening just by looking at the FNIRS data. And in this case, machine learning was applied to train predictive models using FNIRS data from a subject pool to predict which part of a story that they listened. And a new subject not in the pool was used on the brain's hemodynamic response. And to overcome the interpersonal differences in measurements, a generalized canonical correlation analysis was adopted to extract latent variables that are shared among listeners. And then we applied PCA, principal component analysis, for dimension reduction and applying logistic regression for classification. And we were able to reach over 74% accuracy for differentiating 50-second long story segments and around 43% for 25-second shorter segments. And these results suggest the potential of this information content, these unique signatures that are present in the FNIRS to identify and decode like perceived speech and potentially develop new type of prosthetic systems. Another follow-up study was in collaboration with colleagues in Brazil, and Canjida Barreto was a Fulbright fellow visiting my lab. And in this study, looking at this in teacher-student brain synchrony, and we developed a new approach to get better correlation between these time series, different time series. And a more recent study right now that is not yet published, that we're working on the paper, is looking at this concept between children with and without autism and a clinician. So adult and child or clinician patient, in this case, synchrony. And what we are seeing is that in typically developing children, when the adult, the clinician engages, in the orange is the together condition and green bar shows the apart condition of the similarity in the signal using wavelet coherence. We see that when they are working together, shared mental model, and we can see more similar signals in the brain versus when they're apart, still in the same room, but not engaged with each other. But on the other hand, children with autism show that this coupling actually disappears. Again, this is still a data set that we're working on. And before I finish, I want to highlight another aspect of our work, looking at human technology technology interaction, and particularly aviation neuroergonomics. And this is something we worked for more than a decade, looking at series of studies, investigated the brain activity of operators, pilots, air traffic controllers during typical and emergent conditions to evaluate cognitive workload, and later the usability of equipment such as radar interfaces or NIV cockpit display mechanisms. We investigated the training and expertise development with practice in a variety of complex piloting tasks, and we looked at the relationship of brain activity, the neural efficiency, and how we can inform the design of new systems. Which of those different candidate designs are more effective or not. And we expanded our understanding of brain patterns by applying them for decoding mental states and analyzing even neuroimaging data in real time to classify the mental state that can be used to adapt the operation of this avionics. So these are some kind of lot of early demonstration research. But one recent example that I can highlight is the neuroadaptive training, and this was in collaboration with Lockheed Martin Advanced Technology Labs, and we utilized this measurement of cognitive workload and training assessment over time to adapt the training itself. And we tested in a neuroadaptive group and in a control group if we can see benefits to this adaptation. So here is the adaptation program, and we used the Lockheed Martin's simulators here, looking at a low fidelity simulator and performing realistic tasks. And in the neuroadaptive group, they practiced and with the behavior and the brain activity, they changed the difficulty or proceed in the training across this 4-session study versus the control group, just looking at their typical behavior that is typically done. If they are excelled at task, then they move on to the next. If they are not performing well, they drop to the lower level. So, but with the neuroadaptive group, now we take into account the mental effort. So if they excel, but are they really performing it at high efficiency? So then they can perform. Maybe they attended more kind of different, kind of ways to extend your effort on a particular task, not necessarily fully grasping or improving your performance in different ways. So when we look at the results in this pilot study, we can see that we can huge difference between the neuroadaptive group, and this is the level that they reached at the end of the session, giving us a promising result in terms of the adoption of this training enhancement that is enriched by capturing real-time neuroimaging data. And we published this previous year and described how future studies can focus on this methodology and learned lessons and what kind of to do, what not to do in our paper. And another, this is what still not published, an ongoing study is looking at remote and in-person teamwork, and we used esports in this case, and we looked at novices and advanced players, and they perform collaborative tasks in person and also remotely only through cyberspace. And we look at both brain and physiological signals simultaneously. And we have some preliminary results showing that in solo play versus team play and in person versus remote, we can see differences in heart rate as well as in brain activity that individuals, especially experts, are less prone to the effects of the stress, but we are seeing that especially novices benefit from group activity and also with in-person collaboration. And another, again, ongoing work is looking at human-robot interaction, again, teamwork, but in this case, human and a humanoid robot. And we're looking at neurohormonal and brain activity during various characteristics of verbal performance modifications and non-verbal behavior modifications of the humanoid robots. We looked at FNIRS and oxytocin in a large group, and our preliminary results show that congruent robots lead to more engaging HRI, and oxytocin is the social bonding shows that users are attached to robots making errors in the context of social bonding. Again, these are some recent examples of a lot of different ways that we can apply this neuroergonomic method. We talked about neuroergonomics and neuroimaging and this tremendous growth in the technology, but there are also fundamental challenges. There's always this lack of spatio-temporal resolution is a key issue, and we are seeing this continuous improvement in anything, like similar to cameras. Like we have seen the resolution of cameras improved over time. Similar kind of trends we're seeing in neuroimaging systems. There's always need for more higher resolution, more data in all sorts of neuroimaging technologies, traditional and mobile. But there are also issues like noise, nuisance signals, motion artifacts, especially, or physiological signals are sources of contamination for especially mobile systems, causing more variability in the signals. So we have been developing new methods to account for such problems. But there are also more intrinsic issues like non-stationarity and time-varying nature of brain signals. So that, like when we have a participant, they are never the same when they do the task again. They already performed that task. There is some kind of changes because they already participated. So how do we deal with such interpersonal differences? And because even the brain signal from the same individual is not the same across time. So we need to come up with smart ways to deal with that issue. Like we do a lot of repetition, averaging, and we try to eliminate that source of variability. Some example of that problem is here on the right-hand side. You can see graph, like when you have a few samples of data, you can see a decision boundary like between blue and red, like high workload versus low workload, for example. But if you get much more data, 400 minutes of data, you may see a very different decision boundary, the blue and red. But we cannot do practically a lengthy calibration. Just to use, for example, a task like a 10 minutes task, you cannot do 400 minutes of data collection for training or calibration, right? These are practical issues that needs more research from the whole community. And there are some potential ways we can address, like in some recent studies, we demonstrated we can use pools of large number of subjects, so we need less data from one individual subject. But we need, again, more work on all these fronts. And another issue was, like considered like FNIRS is a really slow signal. Hemodynamic response has this 10 to 15 seconds, a single hemodynamic response, like evolution. But I want to highlight actually a recent study that has been breaking some, kind of this limitation impact. So this particular study used fMRI, same hemodynamic response-based signal. And in this case, actually, they utilized this ChatGPT similar like model to map a humongous data set, like 16 plus hours of listening to different auditory segments and mapping each word and individual, and they show that actually they can then predict what the people listened with great detail and even what they see from the brain activity as the brain processes these and creates this semantic comparison. And they show that there's this redundancy in neural representation and attention to speaker when they're actually attending to what is being said increases the performance. There is this huge within subject training needed. And they demonstrated that even with lower resolution sensors and just looking at cortical areas like FNIRS can still decode a lot of this, what they demonstrated. So it shows that, first of all, just even single word level resolution, that is like, a couple of seconds. So there is this critical information in the FNIRS or hemodynamic signals that we still can, we are not yet fully kind of taking advantage of. I think that's kind of what this study shows. But in sum, today I just focused on mobile neuroimaging and FNIRS and how we use it in neuroergonomics. And FNIRS can be used in natural settings, from lab to operational settings. We can monitor cognitive function in the field, in the classroom, in real-world settings, and in different clinical conditions, from autism to TBI, DCD, Down syndrome are some ongoing studies. We can look at longitudinal assessment, and we can actually then apply this for novel brain interfaces like human-to-human communication or human-machine teaming. And as I conclude, I want to highlight we have been organizing this neuroergonomics conference series, and the next one will take place this July in Bordeaux, France. And Fabienne Loth and Camille Jeanette are hosting us. And if you're interested in this work, you're most welcome. And also, please consider Frontiers in Neuroergonomics, our journal dedicated to mobile neurotechnology and neuroergonomics. And with that, I would like to thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Hasan. It was a very interesting talk with a lot of insights, I think, for our research. Very, very interesting. So any questions from the audience?
It was a lot of information, I guess.
Yes, I wanted to say you give us a lot of information that need to be processed, a lot of work and different collaborations. Very interesting. It's not easy to formulate questions. I don't know, maybe in the audience.
I have a question regarding when you talked about the interaction between human and robot. So do you think that this kind of approach can be used to evaluate the interactions with two different social robots into an objective way? Because now many approaches to evaluate the social robots relies on the feedback of the users, which usually are subjective. Do you think that using FNIRS we can have a more objective way to evaluate which approach is better for the interaction between human and robots?
That's a very interesting question. Absolutely. I think we can utilize a lot of these advances in neurotechnologies to look at in HRI, in human-robot interaction. And that's a very kind of interesting way to look at this, is not only the operator engaging with the robot, but also an observer investigating how this kind of interaction is happening can be useful. And by monitoring all their brain activity, we can get insight into the affective state or cognitive state in general. And we can get deeper information than just the self-reported measures. So that's, I think, all new potential research directions, and hopefully the researchers listening to us can explore to the fullest.
I have a curiosity. When you were working with students, high school or elementary students, I don't know, and I see some picture where they were using your device, and do they have problem using it, or were they scared or fascinated or what?
Yeah, that's the social acceptance of these gadget sensors is another critical concept. I mean, we're seeing a lot of potential in the like in terms of the meaningful information that we can get from them, but can we really expect people to use them throughout their everyday life? I think that still needs a lot of work, especially from fashion and design community, to create kind of new, cool-looking systems that can be accepted by the general public, that they become useful. I mean, yes, the functionality is there. We can see the potential of these systems, but they are nowhere close to be, you know, fashionable items. Yeah. I think that's another opportunity. And looking at, you know, colleagues in Italy, like one of the key fashion centers, I think there are a lot of opportunities over there as well. But yes, I think there are some, you know, like group of startups already attempting to this dimension. In EEG, for example, they have come up with some cool designs, but this is very, very early beginnings, I think.
Yeah. Thank you.
Other questions from the audience? Sure. I have just another curiosity regarding, again, the team performing a common task. So one of the problems is to have a shared situation awareness of what is happening, especially in very complex tasks. Again, do you think that this kind of approach would also be able to, I don't know, measure the level of attention of the different members of the team, and so also to use this as a way to identify if someone in the team is not very active, is not very just doesn't give the required attention to the problem.
Yeah.
So it's feasible,
I think,
it's already possible, or it's still an ongoing research? This
yeah,
aspect.
I think it's an ongoing research. The easier scenario is to look at, you know, specific controlled, you know, experimental manipulations. And again, in neuroergonomics, we talk about like monitoring the brain in everyday settings, you know, complex environments. But this again has to be done in a very controlled experimental designs. It's not just you know, monitoring in the wild, just hooking up a sensor, just collecting random data. It has to be controlled, right? And the easier scenario that we have been following is very controlled, like settings where we manipulate the one of the, you know, kind of setups, like in the task, like we can manipulate the task load, we can change the environment or change some of the factors that are critical to the team collaboration, changing the role, how they distribute the task, leader or hierarchy, or there are different ways that we explore. But using this information in real time to adapt the process is, I think, is a future step that we are getting ready to, but not close yet. Because that requires not only group level statistics, but looking at it individual level statistics, and also in towards from there to single trial level recognition of an issue and being able to input that for an action or modification of the overall system behavior. That we are more close to in cognitive workload scenario. We have demonstrated real world classification, like in the real world and in real time classification of one individual's cognitive workload. But doing that as a team and larger setting, I think that remains as a research, you know, kind of target.
Okay, yeah, clear. Okay, if there are no other questions, I would like to